The courtroom fell silent as the judge's gavel echoed through the mahogany-paneled chamber. Michael Sterling, tech millionaire and philanthropist, sat motionless at the defendant's table, his expensive suit unable to hide the exhaustion etched into his face. 36 hours ago, his legal team had abandoned him. Not because they believed he was guilty of murdering his ex-wife Sarah Sterling, but because the evidence against him seemed insurmountable. The prosecution had painted a clear picture: a bitter divorce, a $12 million settlement, and Sarah's sudden death just weeks before she was set to testify about Michael's alleged financial misconduct. The forensic evidence placed him at her mansion the night she died. His fingerprints were on the wine glass found beside her body. Security footage showed his car leaving the estate at 11:47 p.m. Open and shut, the media had declared. The millionaire kills to protect his empire. Judge Patricia Hoffman adjusted her glasses, surveying the packed courtroom with the weariness of someone who'd presided over too many sensational trials. "Mr. Sterling, I understand your previous counsel has withdrawn. Are you prepared to proceed with representation, or do you wish to request a continuance?" Michael's jaw tightened. A continuance meant more time in the public eye, more damage to his company, more nights wondering if his 10-year-old daughter Emma would grow up believing her father was a monster. He opened his mouth to respond when the courtroom doors burst open. A small boy, no more than 9 years old, stood in the doorway clutching a worn leather messenger bag against his chest. His clothes were clean but dated, his sneakers scuffed beyond repair. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as if he hadn't slept in days. "I need to speak," the boy announced, his voice surprisingly steady despite his small frame. The courtroom erupted. Spectators turned in their seats. Court officers moved toward the child. The prosecution team exchanged confused glances. "Order!" Judge Hoffman's gavel cracked like thunder. She leaned forward, her stern expression softening slightly as she addressed the boy. "Young man, this is a closed proceeding. You can't just—" "My name is Ethan Brooks." The boy walked down the center aisle with deliberate steps, ignoring the whispers that followed him like a wave. "I'm 9 years old. I don't have a lawyer, and I don't have parents, but I have something that will prove Michael Sterling is innocent." Michael's head snapped up, meeting the boy's determined gaze for the first time. There was something hauntingly familiar about those eyes, intelligent, unwavering, desperate. The lead prosecutor, David Chen, rose from his seat. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We can't allow random children to interrupt." "I'm not random." Ethan stopped at the barrier separating the gallery from the legal proceedings. "My mother was Rebecca Brooks. She was a private investigator working for Sarah Sterling before she died. 6 months before Mrs. Sterling's murder, my mom started investigating something that scared her so badly, she made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd find Michael Sterling and give him this." He lifted the messenger bag. 3 weeks after Mrs. Sterling died, my mom's car went off a bridge. The police called it an accident. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even Judge Hoffman seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Michael felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Rebecca Brooks. He remembered Sarah mentioning she'd hired an investigator, but they'd never met. And now this child was claiming his mother's death was connected to Sarah's murder. "Ethan," Judge Hoffman spoke carefully, "where are your guardians? Your foster parents or social worker?" "I ran away from my 3rd foster home 4 days ago." Ethan's voice didn't waver. "Because if I told anyone about this, the same person who killed my mom and Mrs. Sterling would know. They have connections everywhere: police, courts, social services. My mom told me that. She said the only person I could trust was the man everyone would blame, because the real killer always makes sure the innocent man looks guilty." Michael found himself standing without realizing he'd moved. "Judge Hoffman, I don't know who this child is, but if there's even a possibility that evidence exists that—" "Sit down, Mr. Sterling." Chen's voice dripped with disdain. "Your Honor, this is obviously a desperate ploy. A child shows up at the 11th hour with a convenient story. We all know what's happening here." "What's happening?" Ethan turned to face the prosecutor, his young face tight with anger. "Is that my mom died trying to protect the truth. She spent 3 months following money trails, recording conversations and documenting everything. And when she found out who was really stealing from Mrs. Sterling's foundation, when she discovered who would benefit most from both their deaths, she knew she was next. So she taught me everything. She made me memorize account numbers, dates, names. She encrypted files and gave me the only password. His voice cracked for the first time. She made me promise I wouldn't let them win." Judge Hoffman removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Mr. Chen, Miss Kane approached the bench. "Mr. Sterling, you as well." Michael noticed for the first time that his former lead counsel, Victoria Kane, had been sitting in the back of the courtroom. The elegant attorney rose gracefully, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. She'd represented him for 5 years, handling everything from business contracts to his divorce. When she'd withdrawn from his murder defense 2 days ago, she'd cited ethical conflicts without elaboration. At the bench, Judge Hoffman spoke in low tones. "I don't care how irregular this is. That child just alleged his mother was murdered in connection with this case. We're going to examine his claims." Victoria's perfectly composed face showed the slightest tension. "Judge, with all due respect, you can't seriously consider—" "What I can't do," Hoffman cut her off sharply, "is ignore potential evidence in a murder trial, especially evidence suggesting there may be more victims than we knew." Chen jumped in. "The boy has no credentials, no chain of custody, no verified." "Then we'll verify." Hoffman turned her attention to Ethan, who stood watching them with those 2 old eyes. "Son, I'm going to grant a 48-hour continuance. In that time, I want Child Protective Services to ensure you're safe, and I want a forensic examiner to review whatever evidence you claim to have. If it's legitimate, we'll proceed accordingly. If not, it's legitimate." Ethan's small hands clutched the bag tighter. "And I'm not going into protective services. My mum warned me about that. She said someone high up in social services was part of it. That's how they got access to Mrs. Sterling's private medical records. That's how they knew her schedule, her security codes, everything." Michael watched Victoria's expression carefully. For just a fraction of a second, her left eye twitched. It was something he'd noticed during depositions, a microscopic tell when someone said something that made her nervous. "Ethan," Michael spoke directly to the boy for the first time, "you said your mother told you to find me specifically. Why?" The boy met his gaze with startling directness. "Because she said you were the only one who'd already lost everything. You couldn't be bought or threatened. And because—" he hesitated, "because Mrs. Sterling told my mum that despite everything, despite the divorce and the fighting, you were the only person she knew who genuinely cared about doing the right thing. She said that's why you had to be the fall guy. People who care about right and wrong are the easiest to frame because they can't imagine someone being corrupt enough to manufacture evidence." Michael felt something shift in his chest. Sarah had said that about him, after everything that had happened between them. Judge Hoffman made her decision. "Ethan will remain in court custody. We have secure facilities for witnesses who need protection. Mr. Sterling, given these extraordinary circumstances, I'm appointing you as pro se counsel for the purpose of examining this evidence. You'll work with a court-appointed investigator. Miss Kane, Mr. Chen, you'll both be present during the evidence review. This proceeding is adjourned for 48 hours. As the gavel fell, Michael saw Victoria lean toward Chen, whispering urgently. The prosecutor's face darkened. The hunters, Michael realized with cold clarity, were getting nervous. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of encrypted files, financial records, and audio recordings. Ethan Brooks sat in a secure conference room, calmly explaining each piece of evidence his mother had compiled with the precision of someone twice his age. Mom started investigating after Mrs. Sterling asked her to look into discrepancies in the foundation's accounts, Ethan explained, pulling up a spreadsheet on the court-provided laptop. The Stella Hope Foundation, that's Mrs. Sterling's charity for foster children. Over 3 years, Almost $4 million went missing. Small amounts, perfectly disguised in legitimate expenses. Mum said whoever did it was a professional. Michael leaned closer, studying the highlighted transactions. These vendor payments: Lighthouse Educational Services, Haven Supply Co., Brightstar Consulting. I remember approving some of these. They're all fake companies. Ethan clicked to another screen. Mom traced them back to a shell corporation in Delaware, and that shell corporation was set up by... He paused, meeting Michael's eyes. Victoria Kane. Your lawyer. Michael's blood went cold. That's impossible. Victoria has been with me for years. She's the one who suggested I settle the divorce quickly, who he stopped mid-sentence as the pieces began falling into place. She had access to everything. My financial records, my schedule. She knew about the prenup loopholes. She knew Mrs. Sterling was going to testify about the missing foundation money. Ethan continued. My mum recorded a conversation where Mrs. Sterling told Mrs. Kane she'd discovered the theft and was going to the FBI. That was on March 15th. Mrs. Sterling died on March 22nd. The court-appointed investigator, a stoic woman named Detective Sarah Park, had been silent until now. Play that recording. Ethan's small fingers moved with practiced efficiency. Sarah Sterling's voice filled the room, tinny but clear through the laptop speakers. Victoria, I need your legal advice. I found evidence of embezzlement from my foundation. Nearly $4 million over 3 years. I'm meeting with the FBI on Monday, but I wanted to know if I need to inform Michael first, given that he's on the board. Victoria's response was smooth, professional. Sarah, that's serious. Before you go to the authorities, let me review the evidence. If Michael is implicated, we need to handle this carefully. Can you send me everything you have? I knew you'd help. Michael might have been a terrible husband, but he doesn't deserve to be blindsided if his company gets dragged into this. The recording ended. She sent everything to Miss Kane, Ethan said quietly. All the evidence, every transaction. And then Miss Kane knew exactly what to destroy. Detective Park's expression was grim. What else do you have, son? Security footage. Ethan pulled up a video file. Mom installed hidden cameras outside Mrs. Sterling's mansion after she got suspicious. This is from the night Mrs. Sterling died. The grainy footage showed the Sterling estate gates. A car appeared at 9:43 p.m. Not Michael's distinctive silver Audi, but a dark sedan. The driver's face was obscured, but the license plate was clear. That's Miss Kane's car, Michael breathed. I've seen it in the firm's parking garage 100 times. Keep watching, Ethan said. At 11:35 p.m., a second car approached Michael's Audi. But the driver who got out made Michael's vision swim. It was David Chen, the prosecutor, wearing a jacket identical to one Michael owned. The security footage the police have shows a car leaving at 11:47 p.m., Detective Park said slowly. Chen must have stolen your car earlier, committed the murder while wearing your clothes, then drove away, counting on the cameras catching what looked like you fleeing the scene. Mom followed Chen for 2 weeks after that, Ethan continued. She photographed him meeting with Miss Kane 6 times. She recorded them discussing how to make sure you got charged, how to make sure the investigation focused only on you. They needed you convicted because once you went to prison, Miss Kane would take over your company's legal affairs permanently. She'd already embezzled from Mrs. Sterling's foundation. Your tech company was supposed to be next. Michael sank into a chair, the enormity of the conspiracy overwhelming. Why didn't your mother go to the police immediately? Ethan's face closed off slightly. She tried. She went to Captain Morrison at the precinct. He's Chen's uncle. The next day, someone ran her car off the road on Highway 17. The police report said she lost control on a wet curve. His voice dropped to barely a whisper, but it hadn't rained in 3 days, and my mum was the best driver I knew. She taught defensive driving courses. Detective Park placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. I'm sorry about your mother, Ethan. What she did collecting all this evidence, protecting you, that took incredible courage. She was brave, Ethan agreed, blinking rapidly. She made me memorize everything in case something happened to the hard drives. She encrypted the files with a password only I knew. She said someday I'd be old enough to understand why we couldn't just run away, why we had to fight. She said, his voice cracked. She said some things are worth dying for, like truth, like making sure innocent people don't get punished for crimes they didn't commit. Michael felt his throat tighten. This 9-year-old boy had lived through a nightmare, had watched his mother prepare for her own murder, had carried the weight of evidence that could destroy powerful people. And he'd walked into a courtroom alone because his mother had believed in justice enough to sacrifice everything. Ethan, Michael said carefully, you could have sent this anonymously. You could have left it at a news station or mailed it to the FBI. Why did you bring it directly to court? Why reveal yourself? The boy looked at him with those ancient eyes. Because Mom said people needed to see the truth spoken by someone who had nothing to gain from it. She said if it came from an anonymous source, they'd find a way to discredit it, to say it was fabricated. But if it came from someone like me, someone who lost everything, who they can't bribe or threaten anymore because I already have nothing, then people would have to listen. She said sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Detective Park stood abruptly. I need to secure this evidence immediately and brief the district attorney. The real district attorney, not Chen. We're going to need protection for Ethan and for you, Mr. Sterling. Once Kane and Chen realize we have this, they already know something's wrong, Michael interrupted. Kane was at the courthouse today. She'll be preparing. Then we move fast. Park was already on her phone. I'm calling in federal support. This goes beyond local jurisdiction now, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, embezzlement from a charitable foundation. The FBI is going to have a field day. As Detective Park stepped out to make calls, Michael found himself alone with Ethan. The boy was carefully organizing the documents, his small hands moving with the same methodical precision his mother must have taught him. Ethan, when this is over, when you've testified and they're in custody, you'll need a place to stay. Good foster parents who... I know. Ethan didn't look up from his work. I'm not stupid. I know I can't take care of myself. I just needed to finish what Mom started first. She spent the last 3 months of her life making sure I could do this. The least I can do is see it through. I was going to say, Michael continued gently, that my daughter Emma is 10. She lives with me when I'm not, he grimaced, when I'm not on trial for murder. Our house is too big, and she's been asking for a little brother for years. If you wanted, after all this is settled, we could see about making you part of our family. Officially. Ethan's hands stilled. He looked up, and for the first time, Michael saw the mask of adult competence crack, revealing the frightened 9-year-old underneath. You don't even know me. I know you're the bravest person I've ever met. I know your mother was an extraordinary woman who raised an extraordinary son. I know you saved my life, and probably dozens of other people Victoria Kane would have hurt. And I know Michael's voice grew thick. I know what it's like to lose someone you love and feel like the world doesn't care. My daughter knows that too. Maybe we could figure out how to care together. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at him. Then, so quietly, Michael almost missed it. Mom said you were the one good thing Mrs. Sterling's life ever had. She said you fought for your daughter's custody, not because you wanted to win, but because you genuinely loved her. She said that kind of love, the kind that put someone else first, was rare enough to be worth dying to protect. Before Michael could respond, Detective Park burst back in. We've got a problem. Victoria Kane left the courthouse 2 hours ago and hasn't been seen since. Her office says she's taking personal time. Her cell phone is off. She's running, Michael said immediately. Or preparing a counterattack, Park countered. Either way, we need to move the evidence to FBI custody now. Ethan, you're coming with me to a safe house. Mr. Sterling, federal marshals are en route to your location. The next 24 hours felt like living inside a thriller movie. Federal agents descended on the case. Victoria Kane's offices were raided, revealing further evidence of embezzlement schemes targeting multiple clients. David Chen was arrested attempting to flee to Mexico. His uncle, Captain Morrison, was suspended pending investigation into corruption charges, but Victoria Kane herself remained missing. Michael sat in a federal safe house, watching news coverage that had shifted from millionaire murderer to massive legal conspiracy exposed. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members, business partners, and reporters. His daughter, Emma, was in protective custody with her grandmother, confused and frightened by the sudden chaos. Through it all, Michael kept thinking about Ethan Brooks, the small boy who'd carried the weight of the world on his thin shoulders because his mother had taught him that some things were worth fighting for. At 3 a.m. on the second day, Detective Park called. We found her. Victoria Kane was at the airport, private terminal, preparing to board a chartered flight to the Cayman Islands. She had $2 million in bearer bonds in her luggage and a new passport. She's in federal custody now. Michael felt something in his chest loosen slightly. And Ethan? Safe. Asking about you actually. Kid wants to know if you're okay. Tell him I'm better than okay. Tell him he saved my life. Tell him yourself. Judge Hoffman has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. She's fast-tracking your exoneration and wants Ethan present for the record. The prosecutors, the real ones, are recommending all charges be dropped immediately. The courthouse the next morning looked like a media circus. Camera crews lined the steps. Reporters shouted questions. Federal marshals formed a protective corridor as Michael entered through a side door. Inside the courtroom, Ethan Brooks sat in the front row, flanked by a social worker and Detective Park. He looked impossibly small in the wooden seat, his feet not quite touching the floor. When he saw Michael, a tentative smile crossed his face. Judge Hoffman's expression was unlike anything Michael had seen before, a mixture of fury at the corruption that had occurred in her courtroom and deep sadness for the victims it had claimed. Before we proceed with the formal exoneration, she began, I want to address young Mr. Brooks directly. Ethan, what you did took extraordinary courage. You exposed corruption at the highest levels of our legal system. You saved an innocent man from wrongful conviction. And you honored your mother's memory in the most profound way possible by ensuring her sacrifice meant something. Ethan stood up, small and straight-backed. Judge, can I say something? Of course. Mom used to tell me that the law was supposed to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She said that's why she became an investigator, to find truth for people who couldn't find it alone. When she died, I wanted to quit. I wanted to forget everything and just be a normal kid. But then I remembered all the other people Miss Kane was hurting, all the other innocents who'd be blamed for things they didn't do. And I thought, if a 9-year-old can't be brave enough to tell the truth, how can we expect adults to do it? The courtroom was silent. Sometimes, Ethan continued, his young voice steady, the system fails. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the same ones hurting us. Mom said when that happens, ordinary people have to be extraordinary. She was extraordinary. Mr. Sterling is extraordinary. I just wanted to be like them. Judge Hoffman had to clear her throat twice before speaking. Mr. Sterling, all charges against you are hereby dismissed. The record will reflect that you were the victim of a deliberate and malicious conspiracy to commit murder and obstruct justice. You are free to go, with the court's deepest apologies for what you've endured. The gavel fell. Michael stood, but instead of walking out, he turned to Ethan. The boy was crying now, the mask finally falling away, 9 years of fear and loss pouring out in silent tears. Without thinking, Michael knelt beside him. Hey, it's okay. It's over. You did it. Your mom would be so proud. I miss her, Ethan sobbed. I miss her so much, and she's never coming back, and I tried so hard to be brave like she taught me, but I'm so tired. Michael pulled the boy into his arms, this small stranger who'd saved his life. I know, but you don't have to be alone anymore. Remember what I said about my daughter, about our house? That offer still stands. If you want it. Ethan pulled back slightly, his tear-stained face skeptical. Why would you want me? I'm just a kid nobody wants. That's why I've been in 3 foster homes. That's why you're exactly the kind of person this world needs more of, Michael interrupted firmly. Brave, smart, loyal, and unwilling to give up on the truth. Emma's going to love you. And he paused, realizing he meant every word. I would be honored if you'd let me try to be what your mum wanted for you. A safe place, a real home, a family. Detective Park stepped forward, smiling for the first time since Michael had met her. For what it's worth, Ethan, I've already run a background check on Mr. Sterling. Apart from being framed for murder, he's boringly clean. Good financial records, excellent references, no red flags. And his daughter Emma has been asking about you non-stop. She wants to meet the brave kid who saved my dad. Ethan looked between them, uncertainty and desperate hope warring on his face. Can I think about it? Of course, Michael assured him. Take all the time you need. But while you're thinking, maybe you'd like to come to dinner. Just to meet Emma. No pressure. A small smile broke through Ethan's tears. Okay. Dinner. 6 months later, Michael stood in the same courthouse, this time for an adoption hearing. Ethan Brooks, soon to be Ethan Brooks, Sterling sat beside him, wearing a new suit that Emma had helped pick out. Michael's daughter sat on Ethan's other side, holding her soon-to-be legal brother's hand. Judge Hoffman presided over this hearing too, her stern face softening as she looked at the trio before her. Mr. Sterling, I've reviewed the social worker reports, the psychological evaluations, and the family integration assessments. By all accounts, this adoption is in Ethan's best interests. Ethan, you've had 6 months to adjust to your new situation. How do you feel about making this permanent? Ethan stood up, no longer the terrified boy who'd burst into a courtroom with nothing but evidence and determination. He looked healthier now, the dark circles gone from his eyes, his posture more relaxed, but the steel in his voice remained. 6 months ago, I told this court that ordinary people sometimes have to be extraordinary. I've learned something since then. Sometimes extraordinary people choose to be ordinary, to take care of a scared kid, to help him with homework, to teach him that family isn't about blood, it's about showing up every day. Michael and Emma have shown up for me every single day. They didn't have to, but they did. So yes, Judge Hoffman, I'd like this to be permanent. I'd like to be a Sterling. Michael felt Emma squeeze his hand as tears rolled down his cheeks. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of California, Judge Hoffman declared, I officially grant this adoption. Ethan Brooks Sterling, welcome to your forever family. The gavel fell to thunderous applause. That evening, back at their house, they established what Emma declared was a new family tradition. They gathered in Rebecca Brooks' memory, the woman whose courage had saved them all. Michael had created the Rebecca Brooks Memorial Scholarship Fund, dedicated to supporting children of investigators and first responders killed in the line of duty. Emma had designed the website, and Ethan had written the mission statement. As they lit a candle in Rebecca's honor, Ethan read it aloud. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Sometimes ordinary people must be extraordinary. And sometimes, in fighting for justice for others, we discover we're not alone after all. This scholarship honors those who sacrifice everything for truth and supports the children they leave behind. Because every child deserves a champion. Every truth deserves to be heard. And every act of courage deserves to be remembered. Emma leaned against her new brother's shoulder. Mom Rebecca would have liked that. It was the first time Ethan had heard anyone refer to his mother so casually, with such natural affection. He looked at Michael, questions in his eyes. She's right, Michael said gently. Your mom saved all of us. She deserves to be remembered not just as the investigator who exposed corruption, but as the mother who raised a son brave enough to finish what she started. She's part of our family now, too, always. Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Instead, he pulled a small photograph from his pocket, Rebecca Brooks, smiling in front of her investigation office, young and alive and full of determination. She used to say, Ethan whispered, that she wanted to make the world safe enough that I could just be a kid, that I wouldn't have to grow up too fast or learn to be afraid of shadows. I think maybe now I can try that. Being just a kid, I mean, with you guys. Emma grinned. Good, Because I need someone to help me convince Dad to get a dog. He keeps saying no, but with both of us asking, "Absolutely not," Michael protested, but he was laughing. "We just got the family settled. A dog would—" "Please?" Both children chimed in unison, and Michael realized with startling clarity that this chaos, this noise, this wonderful mess of a family was everything he'd never known he was missing. As the evening sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in golden light, Ethan Brooks Sterling made a silent promise to his mother. He'd be brave when needed, just as she'd taught him. He'd fight for truth and justice, just as she'd modeled. But he'd also learned to be a kid again, to laugh with his sister, to challenge his father about dogs, to trust that the world could be safe enough for children to simply be children. Because that's what she'd wanted all along. Not a soldier, but a son. Not a witness, but a child with a future bright enough to honor her sacrifice. And in the end, that was the greatest truth of all.